Hello, my name is Elaine Leeder, and this podcast is called From Despair to Repentance: Jews, Spirituality, Prisons, and Restorative Justice. This program is sponsored by the Institute for Jewish Spirituality and Society, where I am a fellow. The mission of IJSS is to advance scholarship, social transformation, bringing Jewish spiritual knowledge to bear on the toughest challenges of contemporary society. We break down barriers between spheres of knowledge and practice, enabling long-term collaboration among scholars, social researchers, and human service practitioners. Please visit us at www.ijss.org to find out more about what we do. In my capacity as a fellow, I've been speaking around the country about restorative justice using a Jewish spiritual lens. This year marks the first year with podcasts, bringing you people who are engaging in the work on the ground with real people, but imbuing what they do with a spiritual practice. To that end, today I have as my guest Rabbi Yossi Bryski. And Rabbi Bryski is a fellow, is the director, the director of the Alternative Sentencing at Aleph Institute. Aleph provides emotional and spiritual assistance to thousands of shattered families, helping them persevere through extraordinary crises while providing support and rehabilitation for their loved ones in prison. Rabbi Bryski advocates for rehabilitative alternatives to incarceration on behalf of eligible individuals at hundreds of sentencing hearings around the country. He studied at the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Brooklyn and the Rabbinical College of America in Morristown, New Jersey. Rabbi Bryski was sent to assist in the establishment of a yeshiva at the old Jewish ghetto of Venice, Italy, where he also received his rabbinic ordination. Rabbi Bryski lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, with his wife and his 6 children, and I am thrilled to welcome Rabbi Bryski to the podcast. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing great. Thank God. Thanks very much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you. So, I'd like you to just say a little bit about who you are and about the organization with which you're affiliated. And yeah, and just tell us about how you got into this and what you do.
Sure. I'll be glad to do so. I grew up in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and in the Chabad headquarters here in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. I made my way out, like many do, after I got married, made my way out to California and then to Arizona, and heard about the Aleph Institute and how they help people in isolated environments, which includes the military outposts and incarcerated inmates. I was always fascinated by, people who were, dealing with crises, but I felt especially attracted to the courtroom and the place where ultimately it's decided and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a bit later. But that's what pulled me in was a person is sitting on the bench making a decision about another individual with goodwill, wants what's best for society and for that individual, and I just wanted to be part of that. I could have gone to law school like many of my other Jewish fellows and many other people I know, but I specifically wanted to be involved as a clergy member, as a rabbi. I wanted to be part of the solution. The rehabilitation of the offenders is what attracted me. I have a passion for people who fail, mess up, and I want. So when I heard that an opportunity was available, they wanted to start up a new department called Alternative Sentencing. It called to me. So even I lived in Arizona at the time, and I got involved with Rabbi Lipsker of blessed memory. He just passed away about four months ago. He used to do this himself, and I essentially now in his footsteps. I try to go in his footsteps and petition the courts and advocate for alternative sentencing.
I see. And are you actually located in Arizona or do you go nationally? How do you operate?
I think I've had only one case in Arizona over 10 years. So it just happens to be that way. I've operated in all the other states and mostly in big population centers, but I find myself traveling a lot.
And what do you actually do when you do these travels?
So the traveling and showing up in court is really the end of a very long process, which really begins sometimes a year before sentencing, a year and a half, 3 years. I've had someone for 5 years waiting for sentencing, and it's working with the individual before sentencing, but after the aha moment, after they've come to realize my life and my priorities, I need a shift. I need to do something differently. I need to change the trajectory. And why not let this rabbi who's trying to get involved in my life, why not let him in? Let's see if maybe he can help me go through this change, this very important shift in my life. And when I come to the judge at the end, when I fly to when I go to sentencings, wherever it may be, I'm just reporting to the judge about all those many, many months that me and my team, the whole team of people that do various things, we'll get to that. I then, it's a presentation to the judge to say, look, while you guys have been negotiating pleas, coming up with ways for the prosecutor to feel good that he or she got their pound of flesh. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Their job is to exact retribution on individuals who committed offenses. That's one of the sentencing factors. Rehabilitation is not on the top of their list, but it's there as well. Defense attorneys are pretty much doing the best they can to get the best deal for their client in any guilty plea. So everyone seems to be happy on this in this adversarial court setting. Everyone is doing what they're supposed to do and doing their jobs well. The judge has to make the ultimate decision. The probation officer has to present to the judge an objective third party opinion about the life and give some context about the individual, the defendant. I'm coming to the judge and saying, while you guys have been hashing out the nitty gritty technical details of the offense and what the person's pleading guilty to and what the prosecution is ready to drop in exchange for that plea, while you're doing all those technical stuff, I'm I'm in the trenches with this guy and this gal. I'm working with them to make a difference in their own personal life, to their families, to the people that they have influenced in a positive way, and to the people that they have damaged in a negative way, and to figure out ways to fix, repair, to passionately say, I came here for a reason, and it wasn't to make such destruction. It was to fix any mistakes that I make, and that's what I'm going to be doing now. I make that presentation to the judge, and if the judge truly believes that the person I'm advocating for is remorseful, is sincere, is really serious about making a massive change in their way of thinking, in their way of feeling, in the way they think of money, in the way they think of family, in the way they think of their past victims, if they can think differently and I can demonstrate that that's been accomplished, the judge is interested in hearing it and sometimes will actually come up with a different idea of how to handle the offender, to punish differently. It's alternative punishment. Alternative sentencing is essentially an alternative punishment.
So, like, what kinds of alternatives might come up besides going to jail or prison?
So they have to be meaningful. I'm going to try to give you examples, but
Please.
ultimately, it's important for me to always find a way to customize the punishment
Uh-huh.
to the offender and to the offense. I need to find something that they can do that will help them to reflect on who they are as a person, the flaws that ultimately exist within themselves as they lurk in every person's soul. That, there's deficiencies that we have that we need to work on, our weaknesses, our weak side, And I have that person, and that person needs to reflect on those deficiencies and learn how to repair them. So the activities and the various things that I'm having them do 50 hours a week, 20 hours a week, or whatever it may be, as whatever time I can squeeze out of them, between now and sentencing, I need them to do something that makes them rethink, helps them to reframe what life is all about. So, for example, maybe we'll get to some of the criteria that needs to be met by individuals, but let me just say it's nonviolent offenders,
Mhm.
first-time offenders, and there's a real good reason for that. Violent offenders, I'm not comfortable advocating for the fact that they are most definitely rehabilitated and therefore let's put them back on the street. I can't advocate for that. I have another team in Aleph, a massive, amazing, successful team to work with the individual while they're incarcerated. But if you're a nonviolent offender, and I'm convinced that you're not a serial Ponzi schemist, if that's a word, and you're not a person who's going to victimize others in the future, if I'm convinced you're a nonviolent offender, and that's great. And also, you're a first time offender means I feel comfortable asking judges for second chances. I'm not so good at asking for third or fourth ones. I just don't know how to feel good about that or feel confident. That's the word. I'm not feeling confident if the person offended more than once.
Mhm.
So once they reach that criteria, um, I think that the customized alternative sentence should be not prison, but rather something that makes them think deeply about, as you can tell, a lot of these people will be like white collar criminals. I'd like to get them to think about how people who make an honest living, who are dirt poor, let's say somebody who's working in an environment where there's people who just they don't have money. They're poverty stricken, and yet they still make an honest living. They also have opportunities to cut corners in their own little space. It's not hundreds of millions like the offender, and it's not tens of millions like that offender, but it's in their little business dealings that they do on a smaller level. They do it honestly and they care about integrity. And when this guy sees that, he's like, oh my gosh, that's more important than chasing the next $1 million. And it's a shift in the way they think. And if I can demonstrate to the judge that that is the best punishment and that it's way better than having him sit and rot in a space where he's in a state of suspended animation. He's barely alive. He's not really alive. He's
Right.
just floating in a space where he's not even being tested to see if he's having those reflections, to see if he's not even in the real world to see if he's making better choices today than he was making 5 months ago.
Mhm.
Let's keep him in the environment within society because he's already proven to you, Your Honor.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm making a presentation right now to the judge.
Good, good.
um, right? Let's see what he can continue to do instead of putting him in prison. Make him do what he's been doing for another year, and make him do it together with a bunch of other new things that we're going to introduce to his program. And this way, the judge feels like he or she is also imposing more than they have already been doing, because the point of sentencing is to impose something on the
Right.
individual. But it should all be compatible with what they're already doing on the path that they're already on, the journey that they've already started to take.
Would you be comfortable confidentially giving us a for instance?
I would
Like
love to.
that would be wonderful. People like to operationalize.
Sure, sure. And I think the first example that comes to mind is the one that sort of helps us see the whole federal criminal justice system from a human perspective. There was an individual who came to us because they wanted to go to the ritual bathhouse in Judaism. If a woman would like to partake in a very, very spiritual, meaningful experience, they go to the mikvah. It's a ritual bathhouse, and it's done in a very special way. With usually with the rabbi's wife is involved, and she had a bracelet on her ankle. She had an ankle bracelet because she had just come from another country, from Israel, and she had come to the States and found out that the company she was working with was actually a company that was in Israel, a gray area breaking of the law. It was something that was not against the law, but the jury was out on whether this should be illegal. This has to do with stocks and betting on whether a stock would go up or down, convincing the person that you're calling randomly around the world that if you lose money, we lose money too. That wasn't true. They were going to make money no matter what the person, and it's like a betting. It's like a betting. In America, it's against the law. So the Americans, when you come into the United States, they immediately arrested this individual together with dozens of others. But this individual came to us because the rabbi's wife said this woman would like to be able to experience the mikvah, and part of that is to perhaps have the bracelet removed under these are extenuating circumstances. She wanted to eventually have a child, and this was part of the Jewish process of doing so.
And
So
the bracelet was a court imposed bracelet on
that
her.
is correct. Until
Okay.
you come to us for sentencing and until you finish this process, which took years, by the way, she would have to wear that ankle bracelet for a few years. She was
Okay.
newly married. She had to explain that to her new husband, that this is what happened when I came into the States. It was a very horrifying experience. We spoke to the probation office. Aleph reached out. They said, absolutely, we understand that this is a special circumstance. She can remove it under, here's the rules, whatever. Fast forward to sentencing after we already had her working in the community and working in the preschool and working with kids and working various different settings we put her in in a very intentional way. She then comes before the court, and although in many instances I find myself discussing family circumstances and saying there's a bunch of little kids waiting at home for this individual to come home to, she didn't have kids. As a matter of fact, she was being told by her infertility doctor that she's not going to be able to have kids if she waits any longer. So if she goes to prison, she's not going to have any kids ever to be waiting for her at home, whether she was going to the prison or to a grocery store. Her window of opportunity was closing. So I mentioned that to the judge. I said to the judge, she's been working on herself. And in her mind, right now, the best she can do for society is to be a good mother and to raise a child. And she desperately wants to do so. And she ultimately wants to raise a law-abiding citizen in the United States, an American child who she's going to train about how to stay away from. In her case, she was, lured into this company, and it was a very unhealthy relationship with the company that she had, and all of them, a lot of youngsters. She then, I asked the judge to recognize that in the Bible, the judge's not Jewish. I don't have to start quoting, the Jewish view of bringing children into the world because it applies to all people. The first injunction in the Bible is be fruitful and multiply. And that doesn't mean having biological children. It means inspiring other people. They become your children because you've given birth to inspiration and for those people to go on and do what they're supposed to do. In her case, though, she had just gotten married and this was their dream. And I asked the judge to recognize the need for her to do so. The judge was very touched by the concept and by the idea and by her desire. And he actually gave her the least amount of time from all the people, which was just a few months, and with the caveat that she's allowed to go to her doctor. Now, the doctor said she has about a 3-4% chance of having a baby anyway, but that's besides the point. She still wanted to grab onto that chance. I just went to Northern California, it was like 2 years ago, to go to the bris of the young boy that was born because a
Uh-huh.
judge saw that this person had already finished one chapter of their life as a single woman and really repaired herself and
Uh-huh.
wanted to raise a precious young innocent child that didn't yet exist at the time of sentencing and give her the opportunity to do so. But the story doesn't end there because I
Oh,
went to the next courtroom about a year later, and there was another young woman from Canada who was brought to the United States, extradited to the United States. She went, just listen, she went to an organization in Israel asking, can you help me place me for a job? And it was this organization is still a very stand-up organization, but they didn't know that this was one of these kinds of, gray area companies with a, pyramid kind of hierarchy going on, and people, were petrified of their bosses, and who were petrified of theirs. It was a very, very, like I said, a very toxic environment. And they sent her there. So why would she think there's anything wrong with it? She went there. But she had, I mean, she was overweight. She was suicidal. It was a horrible, this stood over her like a storm cloud for years. She was almost happy that this was almost going to be over, even if it meant sitting in prison. but she was not going to last in prison. I could tell. So she served some time in Canada, but when she finally did come here, I told the judge, Your Honor, and I knew she would relate to this because they speak to each other, they know each other, they're colleagues of I said, in your colleague in the other courtroom about a year ago granted someone life, and I don't just mean he didn't send her to prison. He granted her a life. I have a picture of a child in my phone right now who is so cute with such long hair because they don't cut the hair till they turn 3. And like this is what happens when a judge sees a human being rather than an offender and says, maybe society should look at this a little differently than, well, this is what you committed. This is how much time you sit in a prison cell. It's not, it changes the whole, the courtroom changes. I feel it, you know?
So what did that judge do?
That judge allowed her to have time served. She relied on the fact that this young woman had already served time in Canada and said that she'd have to stay in the States to serve out her probationary period with conditions that we had, that we helped her with. We helped her get an apartment. And I say we helped her. I don't mean that we actually rented the apartment for her. We found somebody who did. There are so many people who are, offenders are isolated because they think society hates their guts and everyone wants to lock them away and throw away the key because that's how we talk, unfortunately. A lot of people talk like that. But you'll be surprised how many people are willing to step up and say, you know what? I think this is the right place for my charity to give it to somebody who's trying to get things going again.
So I'm wondering, you have been speaking about some clients. Are all of your clients Jewish, or is the organization Jewish and will work with various populations?
The organization is Jewish and works with all populations. Um, my department specifically works with all populations because it's in the name of justice, and justice is not something that is more applicable to one person or another. The Lubavitcher Rebbe in the late 70s made a call for, and you're familiar with his last name because you carry it in a very, very holy way. He talked about prison reform and recognizing when a person has rehabilitated even within the prison walls that they ought to be released early under certain circumstances if it's safe for society. And in 1982, the Aleph was started because of the Rebbe. But his message was to all people. All people deserve to rehabilitate and fix the mistakes that they've made. And unless they're actual danger to society, society ought to be part of that process of helping them get back on track. So there are other departments within Aleph that help inmates, and in those instances, sometimes it's more geared to inmates that need kosher food or
Right,
a pair of tefillin, whereas Christian organizations will help other people who have different other needs other than kosher food
right.
because they're targeting a certain population.
So this is a good segue since this organization, IJSS, is about spirituality and based on the teachings of the Rebbe. So could you speak to the element of spirituality and teshuvah and all other Jewish values that you might see in your process?
You said the magic word teshuva. The world was created, we believe, and humanity was created so that we can fix failure, fix mistakes. The first person that was created by God, the first couple that was created by God, they were told, don't eat from a tree. And immediately, all they ever wanted to do now was eat from the tree they were told not to eat from because we are children. We are curious. We want to try. We want to live on the edge. We want to try to make some extra money, even if it's in not the most kosher way. And that's not to say that the world is conditioned to cause the failure. We have free choice. God gave us the ability to avoid that tree, to avoid that $1,000, not to take from the government, to pay the government and pay taxes to the exact penny, not a penny more, not a penny less than what is owed for taxes. And ultimately, we have free choice. We can choose one way, one path, or another. That's for sure. And when I mess up, I messed up. No one forced me to. Just because God put the opportunity in front of me, I can't suddenly blame him or the world or circumstances that got me to do it. I did it, and I'm owning it. As a matter of fact, that is part of the most beautiful experience that I love being involved with. Teshuvah. Teshuvah means that I know what I did, and I'm going to return to who I really am. Who am I really? A person who was put here on earth to make good with God, to have a relationship with God, to be able to be passionate about that relationship, and the way to do so is by recognizing that my free choice cannot be used for the right purposes.
Very beautifully said. And I wonder, are there other things you might like to tell us about your work or the organization? Anything I didn't ask you about that you'd like to elaborate upon?
First thing that comes to mind is that it takes an army. I'm standing here, sitting here by myself, but I'm never by myself when I'm working. I'm working with the most amazing colleagues, and I'm not just saying this. I mean it. It takes. I have a woman who works with me who gets the entire story. It's not easy to extract the human story and the backstory of an individual, and they do it with such sensitivity. I have another woman who really just prepares all the material, puts it together so that we have a nice presentation for the judge, and so on and so forth. So I sit here as if I do all these things, and in fact, it's the collaboration of myself, my team, the whole Aleph Institute, which is made up of 100 employees, the donors, the people who support it, the people. These are Everybody has a part in making the world a better place through the work that we do.
Rabbi Bryski, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. If people are interested in your work, how do they reach you?
Best way is through email. My Aleph email is, I'll say it slowly, Bryski. So my name is Yossi Bryski, my initial Bryski at Aleph is Aleph dash institute.org.
Good. Well, this has been a delight, and I really appreciate your passion and your articulateness and the fact that we're in the same business.
Yes,
So,
I looked at your website and I said, we now have a solid resource for the work that we do here.
exactly. And now I feel the same way about being able to turn to you. So, Rabbi Bryski, thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you for having me.